Good morning, and welcome to the Universalist Church in which love is the spirit. We are so glad you are here, whether you're here in the building or anywhere in the world. I'm Nancy Gennett, a member of the Board of Trustees. Is this too loud? No, you're fine. If you are an in-person visitor, we hope you'll sign our guest book. If you're online, please visit our webpage, www.westhartforduu.org, to learn more or use the contact page to get onto our electronic mailing list. Our electronic communications are the best way for us to stay connected with all of you, whether you're here or anywhere else. We look forward to helping you become part of the Universalist Church. While we keep moving toward the end of the pandemic, we're going to keep adapting to the moment. We have live streaming available for everyone, for whatever reason you choose. On site, we're following the mask mandate of our town, specifically inviting vaccinated folks into the sanctuary and having our kids and their teachers meet in Fisk Hall until things improve and vaccinations are available for kids too. For now, we're going to have our soloist sing our hymns for us. We hope for good news about the congregational singing in the near future, but until then, we will ask of you in the building to listen and participate silently until we hear that singing together is okay once again. Thank you for your graciousness as we learn another new way to be together. After worship, we'll gather for fellowship outdoors on the front patio or in our Zoom fellowship room online. And now I invite you to take a moment to make your mobile phone silent, turn off your email, and settle in for worship.
Good morning, everyone. I know that with the windows open, it's a little bit breezy in here, but for the sake of good ventilation during COVID time, I'm actually going to ask us to open one of those doors at the back of the sanctuary. And where we can pop windows as fully open as we can, it is safer and better for us all. So if we can manage that, I understand that it might be a little chilly, and if you need to sit in front of a window that is not as open, that would be great. Thank you. So usually, on one of the Sundays nearest the high holy days of Judaism, we have Lance Reiser blow the shofar for us, chant a bit, talk to us about what that means. And this year, of course, because of COVID, it is hard to do instruments that concentrate air into a blast and send it out over the tops of us all. So we plan to return to that tradition next year. And today, instead, we will look at other ways that we can start thinking about how we begin anew, how we repair broken things. Right now, we're going to begin with words about these holy days by Leslie Takahashi. We return again and again to the season of forgiveness, and each time we come bearing gifts, a grudge to relinquish, a hatred to extinguish, a hope that has bloated and distorted, a glancing word that has wounded. Each time we walk the road toward forgiveness, we mutter to ourselves that we have been here before. When will we remember that forgiveness is not so much an act as an attitude, not so much a duty as a love that we give to ourselves as part of the ever-unfolding new beginning? If you have a home chalice, or if there's one back in Fisk Hall, I invite you to go ahead and light that as we light ours here in the sanctuary now. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn. It's number 219 in the gray hymnal. I invite you to listen, to read along, to lip sync behind your mask if you like, and to enjoy Haley's singing for us. Please join me in speaking the words of our affirmation, our covenant. It's printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. How often have you broken something and wished you could unbreak it, fix it somehow, so that it would never ever show, so that nobody would ever know that there had been a problem, so that the crack would vanish? It happens to me every so often. A glass dropped in the sink. Occasionally, maybe you've dropped a computer or an iPhone or a smartphone and had that screen shatter in a way that made it almost unusable. What about a musical instrument? I once was helping with a wedding, and the musician, a violinist, was a very well-known violinist who played in a symphony and had a Stradivarius, and she came this close to crushing it when she fell up some stairs. It was safe, but all of our hearts sank. Maybe a precious figurine or a vase. When I've broken such things, usually I've just sat still to mourn the loss of something valuable or precious or beautiful, and then swept up the pieces and put them into the recycling if I could, or the trash if I could not. But that is not the only way to handle this problem. There are other things that we can do instead, and I'm so excited to show you something that demonstrates that. You might have heard of a style of pottery work from Japan called Kinsuki. It translates into English as golden joinery. And it's a way of taking something that's broken, particularly a piece of pottery, and then filling in the cracks and the chips in that cup or vase or bowl or plate with a combination of adhesive and gold dust. And what that does is it takes the piece and it puts it back together with these shockingly brilliant, beautiful lines in it, showing where every crack had ever happened, and yet somehow enhancing the beauty of this piece of pottery. Back in Fisk Hall, you all have a mug kind of like this, done by the same people, that on one side, they can't see that anything's ever been broken. It looks perfectly normal with the handle. And as soon as you turn it around, you see where about half the mug had been shattered away and then replaced with this golden joinery. That mug is fine now. I probably wouldn't use it to drink from, but I would put it on a shelf and appreciate how something that had been broken so deeply could become something so beautiful. And the same is true of this plate. It was a perfectly fine red plate, I'm sure, before it was broken. But as soon as the artist went back with this resin and gold and filled in the cracks, it's become much more interesting than it would have been as a red plate all by itself. I probably wouldn't eat off of it, but it hangs on the wall of my office right near the door. And if you've been in my office, you've passed right by it on your way in or out. And it lives there as a reminder to me of how things that are broken can also be things that are incredibly beautiful and interesting. When I think about Yom Kippur, when I think about times like this, where we are asked to pay attention to where things are broken, where maybe we have broken promises or covenants or our word, where we've hurt one another on accident or on purpose, I think of things like this. I think of what happens when we break our bones and they knit back together in those spots where they're broken. They can actually become more strong in those spots as a result of the regrowth of that bone. I don't know that this plate is stronger for having been repaired, but it's got a lot more character. It's something that I appreciate much, much more than the original. And I think that's true of each and every one of us, where we have failed or broken a relationship. When we can put it back together, when we can restore what was, maybe not into the same thing, but into something new and beautiful, there is a preciousness to that. There's a power to that. And it can demonstrate to us all the ways in which things can be made better than they ever were before. All of you back in Fisk Hall, I believe you have classes to attend, and we will continue with the service. Our offering is a spiritual practice for us. It reminds us that we are responsible for the strength and effectiveness of our faith, for our own sake and for the sake of others who need what we can offer. It reminds us, too, that we come freely and gladly to be here this day and every day. So as part of our practice of generosity, we share our offering each week with an organization that is in harmony with our values and helps to make a difference in the world. So this month, we share our offering with IRIS, Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services. It's a nonprofit based in New Haven that empowers refugees and immigrants to become self-sufficient, integrated into their new communities. They provide full services, health, education, teaching English, connecting people with jobs, helping everyone to make a home here, and to engage the rest of us who have been here for a while as partners in that work. Our congregation has worked with IRIS in the past to support refugees, and we are glad to work with them again to support the Afghan refugees who will be coming into our community. You'll see boxes in the front of the sanctuary and behind the sanctuary where you can donate warm winter clothes and other such things. Please do bring some in and drop them off. But we also will be sharing our plate with them. So our offering to support the community that holds us and helps us to live out our values will now be received. Ushers, please come forward. May this morning's offering be given and received with hope and gratitude. May these gifts so generously given sustain the work that we do together, the life of this community, and the lives of those in the world whose need is greater than we may know. Thank you. Please rise, in body or in spirit, as we speak our responsive reading. It's number 437, 437 in the gray hymnal. It's called Let Us Worship. I'll read the words in Roman type, and you may respond with the words in italics. Let us worship with our eyes and ears and fingertips. We feed our eyes upon the mystery and revelation in the faces of our compatriots. We seek to know the wistfulness of the very young, every very old, the wistfulness of people of all times of life. We seek to understand the shyness behind arrogance, the fear behind pride, the tenderness behind clumsy strength, the anguish behind cruelty. All life flows into the great common life, if we will only open our eyes to our companions. Let us worship, not in bowing down or with closed eyes and stopped ears. Let us worship with the opening of all windows of our beings, with the full outstretching of our spirits. Life comes with singing and laughter, with tears and confiding, with a rising wave too great to be held in the mind and heart and body, to those who have fallen in love with life. Let us worship and let us learn to love. We will sing together, or at least hold in our hearts together today, our Doxology. Please be seated. As we begin our time of prayer and reflection, I don't have anything to share with you today on behalf of our community, but I would ask you to think about the people who will soon be joining our communities writ large. The last number I saw was 310 Afghan refugees coming into our state. That might have been changed or updated since I saw something. But we will be welcoming people who are here not out of desire, not out of the want to be somewhere else, but out of need. And so I would ask us to hold all of those folks in our hearts, and all of the people who will become their neighbors and supporters and friends, all of the people who are, in some cases, uncertain of what that might mean for their community, so that we can help change ourselves and the world. One of my favorite sayings about prayer is that we do not pray to change the world, but to change ourselves. I think actually both are true. We do pray to change the world, and we do pray to change ourselves. And sometimes the prayers that we use to change ourselves are the ones that change the world. And so in that spirit, let us pray for ourselves and our neighbors and our state as we consider how we might most be welcoming and hospitable to people who had never planned to be here, or at least not like this. Because we are also observing Yom Kippur, I'm going to ask that we pray together the Litany of Atonement. It is in the gray hymnal. It's by Robert Eller Isaacs. It's number 637. And so I will read the words in Roman type, and you may respond with the words in italics. Your words are the same each and every time. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Please pray with me. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. And for those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. Let us take a time together in stillness. May we always remember that when we break covenant, when we fail to do what is right and kind, we can repair ourselves, our relationships, and our communities by beginning again in love and creating restoration. May it be so. Amen.
Our first reading today is from The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, a researcher who has worked extensively on shame and resilience. My research has taught me that happiness and joy are different experiences. In the interviews, people would often say something like, being grateful and joyful doesn't mean that I'm happy all of the time. On many occasions, I would delve deeper into those types of statements by asking, what does it look like when you are joyful and grateful, but not happy? The answers were all similar. Happiness is tied to circumstance, and joyfulness is tied to spirit and gratitude. I also learned that neither joy nor happiness is constant. No one feels happy all of the time or joyful all of the time. Both experiences come and go. Happiness is attached to external situations and events that seems to ebb and flow as those circumstances come and go. Joy seems to be constantly tethered to our hearts by spirit and gratitude. But our actual experiences of joy, those intense feelings of deep spiritual connection and pleasure, they seize us in a very vulnerable way. Our second reading today is from A Path with Heart by Jack Cornfield. Naomi Raymond, a physician who uses art, meditation, and other spiritual practices in the healing of cancer patients, told me a moving story that illustrates the process of healing the heart, which accompanies a healing of the body. She described a young man who was 24 years old when he came to her after one of his legs had been amputated at the hip in order to save his life from bone cancer. His grief and rage were so great, it took several years of continuous work for him to begin to come out of himself and to heal. He had to heal not simply the body, but also his broken heart and his wounded spirit. He worked hard and deeply, telling his story, painting it, meditating, bringing his entire life into awareness. As he slowly healed, he developed a profound compassion for others in similar situations. He began to visit people in the hospital who had also suffered severe physical losses. On one occasion, he told his physician, he visited a young singer who was so depressed at the loss of her breasts that she would not even look at him. The nurses had the radio playing, probably hoping to cheer her up. It was a hot day, and the young man had come in running shorts. Finally, desperate to get her attention, he unstrapped his artificial leg and began dancing around the room on his one leg, snapping his fingers to the music. She looked at him in amazement, and then she burst out laughing and said, "Man, if you can dance, I can sing."
Thank you. So the plate that you see on our altar table and the mug that the families and kids in Fisk Hall got to see a little more closely are really only in the style of Kinsuki. The real thing is very refined. And these, while if you look at them from a distance, they look pretty good. Up close, you can see that they are not made with the same precision, the same kind of intent and focus. The real things are, like many things Japanese, both rustic and refined, using precious materials to make something that looks incredibly organic. For all that refinement, Kinsuki fits within the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi, an appreciation of imperfection. Like the things that show the handmade nature of something, the marks left by the making. Something like brush strokes, or the mark of a tool, the spot where you can see how a hand shaped a piece of pottery. But also the effects of age and wear and use. In the book Wabi-Sabi for Artists, Designers, Poets, and Philosophers, Leonard Cohen writes, "Wabi-Sabi is a beauty of things imperfect, impermanent, incomplete. It is the beauty of things modest and humble, things unconventional. The closest English word to wabi-sabi is probably rustic. They are unstudied, inevitable looking, unpretentious. Their craftsmanship may be impossible to discern. Other people talk about rusticness and roughness, melancholy simplicity. It is a way of seeing the beauty in what is off balance, off kilter. Kintsugi goes one step further than that aesthetic, though. It takes what is imperfect, what is broken, and makes it whole in a new and wondrous way. And this often sounds a little strange to Western-educated and enculturated ears. The closest that we have come, I think, is the idea of shabby chic, vintage resale. That antique or deliberately distressed and antiqued furniture or clothes can be desirable, can be beautiful. Much of the Western world has inherited a very different aesthetic and philosophy than Japan. We were strongly influenced by the ancient Greeks, who had a philosophy of perfection, ideal shapes, ideal numbers, ideal concepts, things that were perfect and unchangeable, the things that we aspire to. And in that way of imagining the beauty and the proper shape of the world, symmetry was important. If something was chipped or broken, it had to be removed and remade. It's not just desirable, but it is necessary to pursue perfection. Masterpieces of art and architecture approach perfection in shape and proportion. And if it's broken, often we get rid of it. Now, this can be useful in terms of math or engineering or space travel. You don't want minor imperfections that cause disaster. But it's not so helpful in terms of psychology or spirituality or religion. In these areas, imperfection might feel stressful or painful. We can take that imperfection and magnify it to feel like worthlessness or despair, that if we are somehow imperfect, we must be discarded or somehow remade if we apply this perfectionistic aesthetic to our own selves. And perhaps some of you will hear this in the Christian perspective and response to sin. Go to hell or be born again. But that's not where universalism comes from. We have a history that reminds us that imperfection is the state of all things, and it is okay for us to be imperfect too. There's a touch of that reminds me of Judaism also. Now, the idealism of ancient Greece did have a long reach and did affect Judaism, but Yom Kippur challenges those ideas. Yom Kippur says imperfection is the natural state of things, and that every year we're going to come back and we're going to try to figure out how to make it better. And I suspect that you know this on some deep level, that imperfection is the state of things. If you didn't know it before, the past, say 18 months or so have certainly revealed it once again. But I'd had plenty of opportunities to recognize that firsthand. For example, when I was in first grade or so, I had taken, I think, a spelling test. I don't remember it perfectly, of course. But I remember that I'd gotten a bunch of the answers absolutely wrong. And normally I was a really good speller. Normally I did really, really well. But in this case, I probably missed 8 out of 10. So when I got home, I took that test out of my bag, and I went to the garbage can in the kitchen, and I tore it up into tiny little pieces, and I threw it away. And my mother saw me and stopped me and asked what I was doing. And I had to admit that I had gotten so many wrong. And she told me that mistakes are simply part of learning. And I had thought that my imperfect test was so bad that it had to be destroyed, that it couldn't be allowed to exist anymore. Thank goodness my mother intervened. Otherwise, I might have been terrified of mistakes all my life and not been able to learn very well. Or worse, not been able to think about myself well even when I failed. Now, to be clear, some of you will have seen this about me. I still don't like doing things badly. And I have really high standards. But I also know that to seek only perfection is to always fail. Imperfection is the natural state of things. The human touch in music, that moment when Gennett was playing, where the sound was a little scratchy at the end, is the moment in which my heart broke in that piece. And that was the point. Those moments of imperfection is what makes it emotionally powerful. A touch of asymmetry or a bit of disorder can actually be comforting. Walking into a home where you see shoes next to the door or a glass sitting on a counter might let you feel like you too can inhabit that space. Imperfection can also be the source of many happy accidents, like penicillin or anesthesia, Scotchgard, Post-its, so much more. And even our smallest creative endeavors benefit from imperfection. The last time I knit a pair of gloves, one glove's thumb ended up being slightly shorter than the other. No one else would ever know, but it really irritated me. I would put them together to set them up, to set them into the cubby so that they were all set for me to pick up the next time, and I would see one that was just a little shorter and be so annoyed. And then I discovered something. One of my thumbs is shorter than the other one. It turns out that my gloves fit me perfectly because of their imperfection. So when you admire the beauty of a fence or a rock wall that's starting to go a little wobbly and tumbling, a path slightly off kilter in a garden, a well-used piece of furniture. When you can see how hands over many years have altered the finish, that's one way to appreciate imperfection. But much like Kinsuki takes wabi-sabi even further, we can go from appreciating, allowing imperfection, to being joyfully imperfect. In The Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown writes, "My research has taught me that happiness and joy are different experiences. I also learned that neither happiness nor joy is constant. No one feels happy all the time or joyful all the time. Both experiences come and go. Happiness is connected to external events. It ebbs and flows with those circumstances. But joy is constantly tethered to our hearts by spirit and gratitude. Our experiences of joy, those intense feelings of deep connection and pleasure, seize us in a very vulnerable way. Often when I hear people talk about joy, part of me kind of senses, I think I know what it is, but I don't always know how to articulate it or how to feel about it. It's more than just intense feelings of deep spiritual connection to me. I think those are the moments in which we recognize joy. But I think that joyfulness is actually a quality of the Spirit, a way in which we approach the world that allows for connection and pleasure to break through. It's easier to feel it when we can appreciate what is good in the world or in ourselves. Brene Brown connects joy with gratitude, which my experience tells me is true. But it's not the same as having happiness right now. It's a way of seeing the world that allows for gratitude and wonder and celebration, even when we're not sure or feeling great about everything else that's going on. Another story. When I was in college, I came out as gay. It was inevitable. I couldn't be something other than what I was. The truth is that I am a terrible liar. But it was the early 1990s, and I was from rural Illinois. We weren't talking about marriage equality at that time as a nation. My Lutheran upbringing told me that I was broken and needed to be fixed, and that if my faith was real enough and deep enough, that brokenness might fade away. So when I came out, it was a great relief to me, but it wasn't easy. And my parents, while responding pretty well, still had plenty of challenging moments because of what they had been brought up to believe and what they understood to be true. And I had to struggle with my faith community and with my faith. There were times when I'd be fine, and then moments when I would go into the campus chapel and just pray that my orientation would change. And then one day, as I was walking from dinner to choir rehearsal, it hit me. My walk gained a bounce, and my heart lightened, and my mind opened up, and I had this thought: I like being gay. I wouldn't change this for anything. I enjoy this. It's me, and it feels good and right, and I am so thankful that this is how I am made. At first, I'd thought I was broken and needing to be fixed. I thought I was like that plate or a mug or a glass I drop into a sink, that there was really no way to repair me but other than hoping and praying that something might be better. But what I realized was that what I needed most was to be healed from other people's beliefs. I wasn't flawed, at least not by being gay. I discovered that what I thought was broken was something that I was actually really deeply grateful for. which resulted in a moment of joy. Joy in being who and what I am. Joy in recognizing the good in something that I wasn't sure was good at all. And so when I read Naomi Remen's story of the young man who'd had a leg amputated, I recognized the joy in his dancing for the singer. That story continues. When this young man first began working with drawing, he made a crayon sketch of his own body in the form of a vase with a deep black crack running through it. And he redrew the crack over and over and over, grinding his teeth with rage. And several years later, I encouraged him to complete these processes of healing. And so she showed him his early pictures once again. And he saw the vase and simply said, "Oh, this one's not finished." And so she suggested that he finish it. And he ran his finger along the crack, saying, "You see here, this is where the light comes through." And he took a bright yellow crayon and drew light streaming through the crack into the body of the vase and said, "Our hearts can grow strong at the broken places." That was my experience too. Joy and pleasure and connection and understanding, all of that lightness, all of that light, coming through the place where I had thought that I was broken. I imagine this young man drawing Kinsuki pottery with the brightest possible golden light coming through all of these cracks, creating these places and patterns of unimaginable beauty. So what I know is that if we do the work of prayer or therapy or forgiveness or gratitude or simply close attention to the things that matter most, they too can be places of joyfulness. But in order for that to become joyful, I had to be willing to encounter something that brought me to breaking. I had to see the thing that made me feel terrible for what it was, and to know that it wasn't me or mine. I had to push the crack even wider open in order to let that light come through, to become joyful in and of myself. Maybe this touches on something that you have experienced too. Might not be the same situation, but maybe you've had moments of feeling broken and then recognizing that there is value in that spot. We begin by appreciating imperfection. We see the beauty in it. And then from there we go on. Louise Erdrich, one of my favorite indigenous writers, writes in her book, The Last Report on the Miracles at Little No Horse. She says, "To love another human in all of her splendor and imperfect perfection is a magnificent task, tremendous and foolish and human. What makes relationships work is not infatuation or perfection. It's finding someone whose imperfections you can live with. It's finding the ways to live with your own." So in all of these places, and any others where you can imagine places that are broken and yet have possibility, look for that melancholy simplicity, that appealing roughness. You may be surprised to create gratitude and joy even in those imperfections. They are, after all, the places where our vulnerability can let us feel most completely. And in that way, I hope that your life and my life and all of our lives can resemble Kinsuki, can be inspired by this wonderful art form, healed where we have been broken in a way that brings us beauty and gratitude and great, great joy. And in that spirit, Lashana Tova, May this be a truly good year, healed and changed for the far, far better, made beautiful in ways that we cannot yet imagine. May it be so. Please rise in body or in spirit for our final hymn, number 400, Shalom Havayrim.
Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom. Leithat, Leithat, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Haverim, Shalom Haverim, Shalom, Shalom. Leithat, Leithat, Shalom, Shalom.
Let us speak together the words of our benediction. You'll find them in your order of service. Engage with the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And please be seated for our postlude. There's something about hearing a piece of music like that with the conversations of children and their parents outside that fits this theme perfectly. Please go out and enjoy fellowship hour with everyone else.